And hello everybody, here we are once again. It's your good buddy Spider with another episode of your favorite podcast. And if it's not your favorite, then it should be, because everybody else's podcast that starts with Let's Talk About isn't as good. So what are we doing? What are we going to do today? Last week we were talking about comic books, and it's a good transition from comic books to tonight's topic, because they're very closely related in a lot of media. And we're going to talk about video games. That's right. Let's talk about this. And, I'm a big video game fan. I like video games. I've been playing video games since I was a young child, back in the old days. Back in computer screens that were all green. They weren't even black and gray. They were green. Green screens. And, so I played games on that. My dad had an old computer. They used to play little games on there. And I think he had, and I tried to play it a few times, he had like some kind of a cartridge game system. It might have been an Atari. I don't remember. But I was never quite very good at all those. And a lot of times he didn't have that hooked up to a monitor all the time. So I didn't get to play that as much. But I did play a lot of PC games. I grew up playing PC games. I played the old side-scroller Duke Nukem games where he was trying to rescue his girlfriend from Dr. Proton, and he collected candy and soda, which is a far bit of difference from what he became later on with the first-person era. But, I used to play Duke Nukem, and I remember he had this game, and I don't remember half the names of some of these games. I don't know if anybody really does, or if they were ever really popular. He had this game where you played like this elf in somebody's house, and I think it was Christmas related, but I don't remember. There wasn't anything really like Christmassy about it, but you were like this little elf creature with a hat, and you ran around in somebody's house doing something. I don't even remember what the point was. And he had this Star Trek game where you would, you had two modes. You could go on the computer and you could fly your ship to different systems, and you'd battle other ships and things with like a little point and click, like launch torpedoes, do this, and it would calculate whether you missed or not. And then the inside was this corridor game where you were trying to go between floors because somebody had got aboard the ship and they'd activated the warp core to detonate it, and you had to get there in time, and the whole thing was timed. And I never could get there in time. I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I was a kid. But video games have come a long way since then, an awful long way. Like they're really powerful. Even like most of the time over the last several years, when there's been a jump between gaming consoles and PC and things, there hasn't been such a. I mean, there's been kind of a dramatic difference, but not as much as you would think. And you're like, all right, well, I could have played this game on the last system, but then the most modern ones have really impressed me lately. There's been a lot of big changes. But we'll get to that in a minute. What are some of your favorite video games? You can say so in the comments during this broadcast. You can also say so after the fact on wherever it's posted. It's going to be on YouTube after the fact. So you can say so there for me, and I will not mind. And I might read it next time I'm on the air, if you like. Or if you're embarrassed, I won't. I'll get to some of my favorites a little bit later in the broadcast, too. But I'm going to go back into more of my gaming history. I played PC games, like I said. And we had a house fire in the very early 90s. And before we had the new house that we had built afterwards, from that, we lived in a trailer temporarily on site where they were building the new house. Which sounds kind of weird, but that's what we did. And my dad got another PC, and so I played games with that. I played Wing Commander 1 and 2, and those are my jams, man. Like, Wing Commander was one of my favorites. I got real big into flight simulators because that's what he had a lot of. He had those, and he had first-person shooters. So I played those. I played Wolfenstein 3D. I played Doom. Rise of the Triad, man, that was a good one. And I'm excited about that because they remastered it. Which is to say they basically just tweaked it a little bit and shined it up to play on modern systems. But they're bringing it back, and sometime soon it's supposed to show up on consoles. And I'm really interested because I haven't played that game in few decades, honestly. But it was fun, and it probably was not age appropriate for me at the time. But my dad had a pretty open view of video games because they all looked kind of cartoony. So he didn't figure that anything in the games was really going to be that bad for me, to be honest. But he didn't let me play some of the other games. He had some other games, and he never really kept up with those games. He got a few of them, but he had a couple Leisure Suit Larry games. And if you know, you know, and if you don't, well, don't. They're a bit gratuitous. But yeah, Wing Commander, Flight Simulators. I used to play Aces of the Pacific, which was a World War II dogfighting game with planes and stuff. I used to play Aces Over Europe, which was the same thing, only a different front of the war. And then there was Red Baron, which was the same game series, but it was from World War I, where you played the prop planes with the 3 wings and stuff. That was pretty impressive, because they would stall out. Like, everything was realistic, so you'd have to be careful how you did your turns and your flying, because they would stall out and then you'd crash. So that was a good time. But flight simulators and first-person shooters, I always played a lot of first-person shooters. I was really big into them. When the first Unreal Tournament game came out, I used to play that. I used to play that in school. And some people may remember, some listeners who went to school with me may remember playing it on the school's servers. And I know a lot of people, like in school, they had Mac and stuff like that, and they used to play Oregon Trail and stuff like that. And I never really played too much of that because I was never very good at it. I was never very good at things where you had to think tactically. I'm a little bit better now, but at the time I wasn't into that. I just wanted to blow stuff up and blast things. And so we would play Unreal Tournament, and I was really, really super good at it compared to people at school. And that was the last time I was good at a competitive multiplayer game. I'm not very good at it now. I don't do multiplayer. I don't play online with people too much. I've done a few attempts over the years, but not many. Not very good at it, you know. And I don't like the trash talking. I don't get into any of that. I'd rather just play the game and have some fun with it. But that's how it is. But after, when we moved into this trailer, we had the PC, I had to play Wing Commander and stuff, but I also got my first Nintendo system. And mine wasn't just, like a lot of people, your first Nintendo, it was the console, and you'd have to hook it up to the TV and all the other good stuff. And this one, and I still have it, it's up in my attic. It's not in the best condition, but I still got it. It is built in to a Sharp brand television. It's all self-contained in one unit. Like, you know how some of the old TVs from the 90s had that VCR underneath built into it? And now some modern TVs have DVD players built into it? This one had a Nintendo Entertainment System built into it. Official. It wasn't like some knockoff either. It wasn't like some, generic thing that just played generic games. So, I played Legend of Zelda, the original gold cartridge. I got that around here somewhere. I still have a few of my old games. We had a lot of Disney games because my sisters were expected to play, like Little Mermaid and stuff like that, and they wanted me to share it with my sisters, but they never really got into it as much as I did. So I ended up playing all these like Disney games, like Chip and Dale and DuckTales. DuckTales was my jam. Oh man, DuckTales. They remastered that and redid it in a better style for 360 as well, and I rebought it for Xbox 360, and I played through it. But DuckTales, that was my jam. And I played a lot of that. I played the first Final Fantasy, which I still have. And I had to cheat to beat it, because no matter what combination of people used, I couldn't beat the final boss in the game, no matter what. Always beat me, the final boss. Could beat every other challenge in that game, every other optional challenge, all the optional little mini bosses here and there, but never that last one. You had to cheat. And I had the Game Genie, which was like an extra cartridge that you attached to the game cartridge before you plugged it into the system, and that let you put in codes and things. And I had this code book that was really extensive for all the games up to the time. That was fun. I had a lot of fun with that. Original Ninja Turtles and the Ninja Turtles arcade game. had those. And you can play those again now, too. They re-released them as part of a collection. And that was some good nostalgia. I had a lot of fun with that. My crowning achievement, not really a crowning achievement, I guess one of my defining moments as a kid was playing the Ninja Turtles arcade game at home. And one time, I was playing it, and I was like to the last couple bosses. I was to Krang or whatever, because he's in that robot suit, that bald suit. And then you fight Shredder. And I got to him, and then it was time for dinner. And I was like, oh man, so I paused it, because you can't save some of those games back in the day. I paused it. I let the system run. Went to have dinner. Came back. The game had frozen. Locked up completely. Had to start over from scratch. I don't know if I started over that day, but I played through it again on another day. Beat the game. Like, was really proud of myself. Came out, was like, oh, I won this game. And then the rest of my family was like, oh, that's great. Didn't care. Did not care. But that's how it was sometimes. And but it meant a lot to me, so that was great. And from Nintendo, I made a big jump. Like, I didn't get any other systems because we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. Not for a while. And so I didn't get another game system until the PlayStation 1. Skipped Super Nintendo. Skipped Sega. Skipped whatever else was around at the time. There was a few game systems, believe it or not, that you may not have heard of. There was the Jaguar, however you want to say it, depending on what accent you want to use. But the Jaguar was supposed to be really awesome at the time, and I think it was really good. But the problem was it just wasn't as easy to develop for as Nintendo was. Nintendo kind of dominated. Even when Sega came out, Sega brought out a big chunk of that market, but Nintendo dominated for the longest time until PlayStation and Xbox started coming out. And I had a PlayStation 1. I still got it. It's upstairs, but it doesn't work very well. But I still got it. Played Final Fantasy VII. Man, that was my jam too. I remember doing fighting all the optional bosses in that game as well, the ones that took a long time, Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you won't, but you'll have to look it up. But the original Final Fantasy VII, Legend of Legaia was another role-playing game that I borrowed from a friend. I had this sampler disc where I'd play like sample levels of Tekken and Gran Turismo. I had wrestling games, Warzone, a few other ones. And then I got the Xbox, the first Xbox system. And that's the system I really got into console gaming, because I had a lot of great games on that. And I still, like, ever since then, the Xbox has been my platform of choice. I've had the original, I've had the 360, I've had the Xbox One, and now the Xbox Series X. And I haven't had... I do have another PlayStation. I have a PlayStation 3, but I didn't really get it for me so much. I think we got it more for other people in the house to play games. But it was a super great deal, and it had some games that came with it and things like that. And I don't remember the whole deal behind it, but I don't play it much, but I have to, because my daughter wants to play it more, because she has games she loves on the PlayStation. She has Journey and a few other games. And, yeah, Xbox, like the first one was... And I still have my original, too, and I always keep my originals. But the disc drive doesn't work very well. You can't pop it in and out. It gets stuck, or it gets stuck open, or it gets stuck closed, or whatever. It won't quite work right. The motors in it are bad. And you can't really open those up to do work yourself very easily. You can, but, it gives you problems. But yeah, the Xbox. Love the Xbox. I took that with me when I moved out of my parents' house. And I remember the first game that I played with a surround sound system. Now that was awesome. I had Unreal Championship 2. I bought that new in the store, Unreal Championship 2, brand new in the store. And I bought a used sound system from a buddy of mine. He didn't have the remote. So at first it didn't work in surround. It only worked in stereo. So half the speakers would just sit there and it was kind of like, ah. So eventually I got a universal remote and I got it to work. And man, was that an experience. In my one room in the duplex I shared with a couple other people when I first moved out of my parents' house, jamming on my games in the night. Oh man, they did have to tell me to turn that down a lot of times. That was a good time. But after I moved from there to farther deeper into the Ohio wilderness, of course, I got the 360 when I was in the apartment. And man, did that upgrade a lot of stuff. Like, I was way behind because the 360 had been out for a number of years before I got it. The next system was coming out not too soon after that. Like, the first Xbox Ones were coming out very soon after when I got the 360, so I was pretty far along. But I got a lot of good games for that, and I still play a lot of those games today because they're either backwards compatible, or I have the 360 hooked up as I speak, so I still play that. And then, of course, the Xbox One came after that, got one of those. And then the Series X, man. I go on and on about the Series X. I didn't think it was going to be that much more impressive. But it is. It's actually, I can see the differences. Some things they exaggerated. Like, they said load times were going to be almost non-existent. But, no, yeah. Not unless, like, you're actually running a true-to-form gaming PC, or you're going to have load times that are going to be non-existent. And even then, you might have a hiccup. But they're good. They're better than they used to be. Like, I'm playing, one of the games I'm playing now is Gotham Knights, which is the latest in the, Batman Arkham Asylum series of games. Basically, it's connected, but I guess it's, like, slightly side-connected. Like, some of the events are different, so it's not directly, you don't have to play the other ones before you play it, but it might help a little bit. But the load times on it are really super good. Like, I'll be sitting there and I'll be like, okay, it's a loading screen, and I'll be thinking it's going to take a lot longer than it is, but when I look again, oh, it's ready for me to jump back in and go. So it's pretty impressive. And some of the old games, it improves some of the loading times from there, boosts the graphics, that kind of stuff. So yeah, video games, it's been a long history. And I did do, somewhere along the line there, I was still trying to do some PC gaming. When I had the 360, I still did some PC gaming. I played Star Wars Battlefront and Empire at War and a couple other ones. But eventually it got to be too much to worry about upgrading the PC when the console was just that much more convenient. And I've kind of stuck with that. Like, I haven't had a gaming PC in quite a long time. Even when I still had a PC here where we're living now, I didn't... it wasn't good for games. It was kind of, but it wasn't. So I didn't do too much with it. But, because I was trying to be on Steam. Steam, of course, for people who don't know, is a game subscription service where you pay for Steam. I think you pay for Steam monthly, maybe. Or maybe it's free. But the games are super, super reduced in price. They're ridiculously cheap because you're paying into the platform, I think. It's been a while since I used it. And some of the games even you can play for free as long as you have the Steam service. And I have a bunch in my Steam library, but I can't play Steam really because I don't have a system that'll run it. So, but yeah, a lot of games. I've played the entirety of the Halo franchise, which unfortunately has started to suffer over the last few titles. I tried to get into Bungie's Destiny series, and the first game had so many highs and lows. Like, every time it was good, it then got really bad. And every time it was good, it got really bad. And then it was good, and then it was really bad. And it ended kind of... When they stopped supporting it, it was just kind of like, it's okay. It's playable. It's the most playable it's been since I got the game. But it could have been so much better. And it left such a sour taste in my mouth. I never got the second. Didn't play it when it was free on Game Pass, and I'm not going to get into it. Probably not. So, which is a shame. But Dragon Age was a good series. Deep role playing, a lot of point. They've gotten kind of simpler over the years too. Although Inquisition, I think, was a step up in complexity from Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age Origins was really complex because it was based off the old school RPGs. Dragon Age 2 was super simple. But Inquisition, which is the third one, got back into the, you had to do a lot more customization and a lot more intricate things. Along with Dragon Age, you had Mass Effect series. Played all those. I've got the anniversary collection now because they went back and remastered all that. And what else? I've got the modern Duke Nukem stuff, which is not great, but I mean, what do you expect? I don't expect much out of a Duke Nukem game, honestly. I expect him to say stupid things that are funny, to do stupid things, to kind of go over the top, and to, do what he does. Now that I have my daughter, she's into games, and her tastes, of course, are a bit different than mine, and that's good, that's fine. But we do like some of the same games. But I kind of had to expand my repertoire of games that I pick up with her in mind, because that way we both can play it, or there's some games that are just for her to play. Like, she's got a couple that I'm not, like, she's got My Little Pony, and she's got things like that, and I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna sit around and play Paw Patrol, probably. I could, but I'm not. But she plays that. But she's a huge fan of Goat Simulator. If you're not a gamer and you don't know, you won't understand. But man, Goat Simulator is hilarious. The third one. What's funny about Goat Simulator is it doesn't take itself seriously at all. Like the first game told you flat out, yeah, the game is buggy, half broken, but that's how we did it. You're gonna play it or you're not. And so you play it knowing that it's half broken, and you don't mind. There wasn't a Goat Simulator 2, which is where the joke was. They made a Goat Simulator 3 without making a 2 because they thought it was funny. And it's got all kinds of improvements. There's some things that the first one did better, but there's all kinds of things in the third one that are hilarious. And Untitled Goose Game, that's another one. That's a game that I think was actually a mobile game first. And you just play this goose in this little European village, and you're just going around causing trouble trying to collect a bell from a bell tower, and do a bunch of stuff before a timer runs out. So it's pretty fun. She likes that. She plays Subnautica, both of those games, the first and the second, which she plays on creative mode. There's a story mode on both, but it's real difficult. It's one of those crafting, survival type things. I'm not really all that great at those all the time. The Long Dark is my favorite example of that. I just wish there was more, like, exploring to it, because I spend so much time upkeeping things that it takes away from I just want to, like, walk around and see the whole world with almost no consequences. I want to have, like, one of these days do, like, a pure, like, real survival thing and not pay attention to that, but I've done that a few times, and I would love to have a true sandbox mode. But The Long Dark is good. Of course, my Transforming Robot games, my Transformers games, I played on 360 and on the Xbox One. And there's a lot of good rumors that those might be remastered and brought back. And man, am I looking forward to that, because I loved those games. Loved those games. Not every single one in the franchise. The one was a bit of a letdown, the third one, because it tied into the movies at the time, and the live-action movies at the time were really suffering. Like they weren't very, very good. They've kind of done better over the last couple of movies. I've still got some problems with them, but they're bringing me back in a little bit. I'm more interested than I was. But Forza games are great. The Horizon games are good when they're not forcing you to do silly things for no particular reason. I like just driving around and just smashing into stuff. And what else is there? All kinds of good ones. Like, there's a few games I still wish that they would bring back. The Chronicles of Riddick game for 360 isn't backwards compatible with the modern systems. Like, you can't play it on a modern, you have to have a 360. And that's one of my favorite games. All the stealth was so good, but they could do better with it, with modern controls and modern graphics and modern, the way that the processors and stuff work. Everything in that game would work a little bit better on a more modern system. And I would definitely replay that. Now, there is hope that it could come back and be re-released, because with Microsoft doing this big acquisition of Activision for people who are in the know about all that, then that opens up a lot of those games that Activision has kind of been letting sit on the side of possibly coming back. Because if you can do a light remaster of a game as a cash grab, why wouldn't you? And that's probably what they're going to do. And you know what? Depending on the price, I'll rebuy some of those games. They're worth playing. I'll play them on modern consoles. I don't mind. If they charge like full game price, like $60-$70 a pop, well, you know, I don't want to do that for a game that's like 20 years old. But $20, $25 maybe, you know, I don't mind. I like playing old games. I'm a big fan of old games. We also have a Nintendo Switch. We have a Wii. I never thought I'd have a Wii. I was never really into it myself, but the family likes the Wii. They play the Wii every so often, and they like the Switch. I have played the Switch a little bit because they brought back Final Fantasy, so I can play the first game there, and you can play a lot of the old games. You can play the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo. You can play Sega games on it because they bought a lot of Sega's back catalog. You can play GameCube, Nintendo 64 games, a lot of that stuff. You have to pay like a subscription because it's an expansion pass thing. But it's a smart thing. It opens up all these options. And I like how game systems are versatile like that now. I like the versatility. And that brings us into kind of like a necessary evil, because in order to do all these things, they have to be connected to the internet like all the time. And I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing. I like the internet. I use the internet. Obviously, you guys are listening to me over the internet right now. But the internet goes out sometimes. Your local provider just drops out. Your router stops working. Your modem stops working. Things wear out. The cords go bad, you know. And you don't know when you're going to be back on. And if all of your entertainment requires that connection to function, you've got nothing. And I don't like it. I mean, I like doing other stuff. I like reading books. You guys know that. I like doing other things. But I don't want the rest of my daily life to all be dependent on a service that could go down at any time. You know, it's more stable than it used to be. But on the other hand, it's not always like how it should be. People get to a point where they're like, oh yeah, it's okay, it's good enough. And then they leave it. And I don't know. It makes me kind of grouchy. But whatever. That's an old man rant for another day, probably. That's for a show in the future. The internet. How's that? That'll be in the next coming weeks, I'm sure. The internet. We can talk about some perils and pitfalls and things like that. But yeah, so what are you guys' favorite games? By all means, remember to tell me. Drop a comment on this on YouTube after the fact, since nobody's chilling out in the chat room. Everybody's off playing games. And, yeah, I would love to hear about it. I would love to know. Because I got all kinds of good games I like. My favorite game of all time, in case anybody wonders, is Dead Space 2. Why 2, you ask, and not the first one? There was a huge improvement in combat capability. The environments were so creepy. Oh my gosh, were they creepy. And the third one is more like a capstone for the whole series. It was okay. It did what it meant to do. But the second one just... Ooh, chills. And, yeah, favorite game. All kinds of other good games, though. Like, you still got modern Doom games and things like that. And there's rumors, I think. They just re-released a remastered version of Quake 2 after having a remastered version of Quake last year or the year before. And, supposedly, Quake 4 was brought back up to spec for PC recently. I think it's on Steam or something like that. I don't remember for sure. But if they're going to do that, and they've brought back Quake 2 for consoles, I think they'll bring Quake 4 back to backwards compatibility, because it's on 360, but it's not backwards compatible. So, and I have a copy somewhere. I think it's loaned out. Pretty sure it's loaned out. But I would love to play it like a remastered version, because that's a game that would run really well on a modern console. It uses the Doom 3 engine and all that other good stuff. Yeah. Fun times. And now, some of you guys might know that the other half of this Uncanny Earth, Rob likes to play fighting games. He's big into Street Fighter. And he's good at Street Fighter, and I am not. And so half the time, when he's in a mood where he wants to show off, he's always going to be like, hey, you want to play Street Fighter? And my answer is always, absolutely not. Because he is just really good. I've never won a match of Street Fighter against him, ever. And I never will. Because that's what he does. That's what he's into, and I'm just not. And no matter how much practice, I'm just not going to be good at it. I don't do fighting games. I played Mortal Kombat. I'm okay. I played the DC one, Injustice 2. But I'm not, that's not my jam. I don't get button combos, stuff like that. I like to shoot things, blow things up, or do role-playing things. Or sometimes I get into walking simulators, believe it or not. I like walking around, seeing scenery, that kind of stuff. I don't mind. So yeah, video games. I like them. I'm a big fan. And I will probably continue to buy them. As long as they keep improving. Sometimes they'll get to a point where they'll be like, oh yeah, we're going to keep this franchise going, and then the franchise will go downhill. 2 examples. In wrestling games, they've gotten really bad. The last great one was WWE 2K14. After that, they tried new systems, new button combos, and it just never worked. Plus, I'm not as into the roster anymore. I don't know any of the modern people very much. I don't watch it so much. Need for Speed is one that got weird over the years. They kept taking out the stuff that made the core of the game and replacing it with other stuff. So it was supposed to be like this knockoff of Grand Theft Auto, I think. And it's never been as good. It's never been as good. And unfortunately, a lot of the franchises are getting like that. Even though I like Halo, the modern ones, the newest ones, never as good as the old ones. And I don't think they're ever going to be, unfortunately. Now, Doom keeps making better and better games now. Doom Eternal was fantastic. Oh my goodness, was it fantastic. And a huge improvement over the 2016 revival. Elder Scrolls games, and I have a weird relationship with their Elder Scrolls games, because Morrowind was my favorite one. But they haven't brought it back. It's backwards compatible, but it runs so rough. It really needs a remaster. And Oblivion improved a lot, but then went backwards in some cases. Things were a little bit boring in places. And then Skyrim, really improved the graphics and everything, but then the systems were so much simpler. Which can be fun. It's easier to get things done, but they cut out so many really iconic things. And the online one I gave up on. I uninstalled it eventually, because it required if you're not hanging out with a group of people, then you're not getting anywhere. And I don't like hanging out with people. You guys know that. You folks know that. So, I have ups and downs with some of these games. But that's it. That's all I've got. I'm not going to go sideways again. And, I hope you folks enjoyed. And I will see you folks again next week for another episode. So until then, of course, game on.